Why will this ranking annoy everyone? Most riders still think brands are separated by flags, with Japan in one corner, Europe in another, and cheap China tucked away somewhere else. That is just not how bikes get built anymore, because a premium motorcycle might roll out with an engine designed in one country, cast in another, and put together somewhere else entirely. You might end up with a bike supported by a dealer that is either totally solid or completely lost the second a sensor throws a weird code. Then the Dakar Rally shows up and scrambles everyone's brains, because seeing a logo in the desert makes people think their weekend bike will never break. In this ranking, I am not scoring bikes based on vibes or spec sheets, but I am looking at what actually happens after you hit your first real problem. Level 1 to 3, disposable, rebadged, and bare minimum transport. Level 1 is what I call the no-name rebadge zone, which includes generic brands like Tao Tao and Dongfeng that you often find online. You see a cool price tag and plastics that look like a big-name brand, so you figure it cannot be that bad. But the trouble starts when you need a clutch cable or a fuel pump. Nobody can tell you the correct part number, because the same bike gets sold under 3 different names. And the dealer network is so thin that warranty claims turn into weeks of waiting for emails. Resale value does not just slide down, it drops off a ledge the moment a buyer asks where they are supposed to get spare parts. I remember a guy who tipped one over in his driveway and snapped a clutch lever, which should have been a simple 5-minute fix. Instead, it turned into weeks of measuring the perch with calipers and posting on forums, because there was no real parts catalog to look at. Every listing he found said it fits most 250 to 400 cc bikes, which means absolutely nothing. So the bike just sat there while the good riding weather passed him by. This is what cheap actually means in the motorcycle world, because it is not just about the low price you pay up front. You pay for it later with downtime, losing entire riding weekends because shipping takes forever, and local shops refuse to touch a bike they cannot source parts for. The few mechanics who will work on them often charge extra, because every bolt feels like a surprise waiting to happen. If you are handy with a wrench and treat it like a disposable tool, that is fine, but if you just want to buy it and ride, level 1 is a trap. Level 2 covers the big volume budget builders like Hyosung and United Motors, which sell a ton of bikes and can be totally fine for daily use. These bikes usually run and the frames hold up well enough, but the overall feel is more like a kitchen appliance than a high-end machine. Quality swings wildly depending on the model and the year, and the cheapest trims always get the bargain bin tires, chains, and bearings. You will see flashy features like big screens and LED lights used as bait, but then the switchgear feels flimsy, and the dealer tech looks at the service manual like it is written in secret code. If you want to spot the difference between a real level 2 brand and a level 1 lottery ticket, you have to start with the boring stuff. Check if the VIN decodes cleanly and read what the warranty actually says about labor and diagnostics, instead of just looking at the years covered. The big thing to look for is dealer density, and I do not mean a guy an hour away, but a place where the techs have actually seen your bike before. Level 3 is the bare minimum transport that people quietly love, featuring basic commuter brands like Hero and SM. These are the kings of the morning commute because they have simple engines and easy oil changes. So they start up every single day, just like a coffee maker. You will still find carburetors on some of these models, while others use basic fuel injection. But the whole design goal is to make sure the bike is never fussy. The trade-off is that you get basic suspension and tech that is usually a generation behind. So do not expect fancy traction control or top-shelf brakes. You buy these because you need to get to work, you want your insurance to stay low, and you need a bike that will not punish you for skipping a weekend of maintenance. These levels are perfect for students, delivery riders, or anyone on a strict budget who cares more about predictable costs than bragging rights. If you are a weekend buyer who wants a bike to feel special every time you open the garage, you will probably be disappointed because these bikes do their job and nothing more. Here is a quick reality check for you, because your Japanese or European bike is probably made of global parts anyway. The only math that really matters is whether your local dealer can get the right part fast and whether the factory keeps those parts in stock for years instead of months. Level 4 to 6, India plus China, value wars, and the good enough sweet spot. Level 4 brings us to the industrial giants from India, specifically brands like TVS and Bajaj. Because these companies build such a massive volume of motorcycles, they have become incredibly good at the parts of manufacturing that most people find boring, like casting, machining, and managing a complex supply chain. They build engines designed to survive extreme heat, thick dust, and low-quality fuel, which is perfect for owners who might treat an oil change more like a suggestion than a requirement. In many parts of the world, bikes like the Apache or the Pulsar aren't just seen as beginner bikes. They actually make up the entire market. The trade-off here is that you will definitely notice where they saved money on that last 10% of the build. You might see it in the depth of the paint or the way the switches feel under your thumb, and the dealer experience can vary wildly because one shop might really know the bike while the next one is just trying to move units as fast as possible. Level 5 is what I call the feel first lane, and this is where Royal Enfield really shines. These bikes are all about a relaxed ride where the power never feels like it's in a rush, and a 350 or 650 twin can make you want to take the long way home without needing a rocket ship to have a good time. Royal Enfield has improved a lot lately by offering better fueling and more consistency across the line, so they don't feel like a DIY kit you bought in a box anymore, but you still need to keep your eyes open. These machines are quite heavy for the amount of power they put out, so if your daily ride involves freeway blasts or climbing steep mountains with a passenger, you might find yourself wringing the neck of the engine just to keep up with traffic. Little annoyances can still pop up, like a bolt that vibrates loose or a sensor that starts acting up. So finding a dealer who actually rides and performs a real pre-delivery check is going to make a huge difference. Level 6 is the point where China starts making the old school brands explain why their prices are so high. Brands like CF Moto, Cove, and Vogue are showing up with high-end brakes, solid power figures, and a level of fit and finish that finally feels normal. The big question here is the long game, because nobody knows for sure if you can get parts 3 years from now or if your local mechanic can actually diagnose a code. You have to decide if you want to be the test case for a new brand or stick with what you know. Let's do a quick gut check. Are you ready to put your money down on one of these new Chinese disruptor brands, or are you a fan of the old guard for life? Drop a comment with trust or no way so I can see where everyone stands on this. Just remember the Dakar reality check before you get too excited. A rally bike has a full support crew following it around, so don't confuse a race win with what it's like to own a bike when it decides to throw a fit in the middle of a rainstorm. Once you move past level 6, you start paying for tradition and a massive support network, but that invoice usually hides a pretty big brand tax. Level 7 to 10, old guard trust, performance, and the expensive because I can tiers. Level 7 is where we find the Japanese value kings, and Suzuki is the perfect example of this category. You buy a Suzuki because you want a machine that keeps running even when you aren't exactly a perfect owner, and since the used market is absolutely flooded with them, finding parts or advice is easy even in a tiny town. The catch is that you are often riding a design from 10 or 15 years ago, which means the dashboard looks basic and the suspension can feel a bit dated, but that motor will just keep turning forever. There is a nice financial benefit here too, because this is the level where depreciation finally starts to chill out. Most level 7 bikes took their biggest hit in value years ago, so you can ride 1 for 2 full seasons and sell it without lighting thousands of dollars on fire, like a level 10 owner who changes their mind after 6 months. What makes level 7 so great is that the long-term costs stay low, because when something finally wears out, it's usually just a chain or a brake line rather than an expensive electronic brain that needs to be replaced. Level 8 is the consistency tier, and this is where Honda lives. Honda usually gets the small details right, like a throttle that feels smooth and controls that stay tight for years, and the paint tends to look great even as the bike gets older. The downside is that you are going to pay more just to get in the door, and some Honda dealers price their service like they are working on a private jet. So the most reliable bike can still end up having the most expensive oil change if you don't shop around. This is the tier for people who want their ownership experience to be boring in the best way possible, which lets you spend your time planning trips instead of searching through forums at midnight to figure out a repair. Level 9 is the performance without the drama tier, which is the home of Yamaha and Kawasaki. This is the level where actual race technology starts to trickle down into bikes you can buy at the showroom, like slipper clutches that keep the rear wheel from hopping when you bang downshifts into a corner. You also get frames that stay calm when you're pushing hard instead of feeling bendy or vague, which is why a bike like the Ninja 400 feels so planted, even though it's often called a starter bike. Dealers almost always have these parts in stock, and the used market stays very healthy because these bikes are so versatile. If you want one single motorcycle that can handle the commute, a weekend in the canyons, and an occasional track day, Level 9 is where the smart money usually goes. I have to give you a wallet warning before we hit Level 10. Going premium means you're getting more sensors and modules. So a tiny electronic switch can park your entire bike until a spot opens up at the dealership. Level 10 is the premium chaos tier, featuring brands like Harley-Davidson, Triumph, KTM, BMW, and Ducati. Lane A is what I call lifestyle premium, which is where Harley and Triumph live. You are paying for the sound, the paint, and the presence of a bike that makes you want to ride to the local hangout just to show it off. The specs usually look a bit weak for the price, but most owners don't care because the point isn't winning a battle on a spreadsheet. Lane B is for the tech gamblers, and that means KTM and BMW. When these bikes are working right, they feel absolutely unreal because they are fast, stable, and packed with features that make a 1,000-mile ride feel like a trip to the grocery store. Then, a tiny $40 side stand sensor glitches out and puts the bike into a 20-mile-per-hour limp mode when you're 500 miles from home. And you'll realize very quickly that the reset button is hidden inside a dealer's laptop. Inside Level 10, you also find the icons like Ducati, which can feel surgical and look like a piece of art, but the service costs are high and the schedules are strict. You aren't just buying a motorcycle here, you're signing up for a long-term relationship with the brand. Quick CTA, pick your level, then choose the brand. You need to pick the level that actually matches your life, so make sure you check out the dealer network and parts pipeline before you fall in love with a fancy tank badge. Drop a comment about a brand you loved on a test ride, but totally regretted after 6 months of ownership. If you enjoyed this, subscribe for more, and check out our next video on which brands make the best Dakar-style dual sport buys.